Join me in welcoming our last speakers before lunch. We have Michelle Gibb, and we also have Katie Thomas. So please join me in welcoming them to the stage.
Hey everybody, thank you so much for having us. Before we go to lunch, I thought we should talk about humanizing insights. And let me just give you the genesis of this conversation we're going to have. Is in the last 6 months, I've been asked to present at very large organizations, global organizations, where this topic has come up that we're going to talk about today, which is that we have so much technology, so much innovation that is, bringing great insights to our entire industry, but yet we're starting to lack a bit of humanity. So much so that in some of the largest companies in the world, they're moving the names of their organizations from consumer insights and customer insights to human insights. And after you've heard this for the third time, eventually you're like, okay, we got to talk about this idea. So we have some special guests here. I'll let them introduce themselves. We're going to talk about Re-Humanizing insights. And I'm going to talk very briefly about how we're going to categorize insights, but I'll do that in just a minute, and then we're just going to have a great conversation. Please use the app if you want to engage with us, and then we'll ask the questions as we get them. So with that, can I ask you to quickly introduce yourself and kind of your role within Insights?
Sure thing. As Director of Market Research and Competitive Intelligence at Alchemies, my name is Katie Thomas. We are at the forefront of connecting with consumer insights. I lead a team of research professionals, and it's really our job to be presenting the insights that matter to key brands for our medicines that are in the market right now and pipeline medicines.
Okay. Michelle?
Hi everyone, I'm Michelle Gibb. I'm on the Global Insights and Analytics team at Mondelez, and I lead the transformation agenda, which really means I get to look into the future and see where we need to be 5-10 years down the road, and really work on that roadmap of capabilities and processes and skill sets that we need to develop to get there. And this combination of consumer data and the human insights and combining that is a big piece of our agenda, and how we need to bring those insights forward and how we have to combine to really get to the magic of the insights.
Mm-hmm. Good. So let's just start off with the first question I have is, I've been in the insights industry for 20 years. And how do we get to a place where we're at a major research conference and we're talking about swinging to become more human in our insights? Like, what is your perspective on how did we get here that we're talking about humanity and human insights?
Well, I think all of us here in this room have been under pressure to provide faster insights. And in reality, I think people are asking for faster answers instead of faster understanding. Right. And at least that's something that my team and I struggle with on a day-to-day basis.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. And it's a pendulum, right? And I think, over the last few years, we've gotten distracted with the technology, right? I know our stakeholders are certainly asking, what are we doing about AI? What are we doing about all this data? And I think, we sort of swung the pendulum there and really have been looking at that. But I think even at the conference, and the little bit I've seen right now, is you're seeing that pendulum swing back, right? I think we've all tested the technology, we've tested, what we can learn from it, and we've realized it's a tool and it's a piece of the story, but it's the combining of the human element that brings the context. The tool can only get us so far, right?
So let's talk about that balance, because you're right, our executives need answers and insights at the speed of business. But in doing that, we may be losing some empathy. And I know that you specifically talked about this balance. So help me understand a little bit of how do you think about that balance of getting, I'll talk about this as this idea, and I know this is not right to say it this way, but fast insights versus behavioral insights or human-centric insights. I know that there's a lot of overlap, but for sake of conversation here, fast insights is, I think, it's testing. It's ad testing, it's concept testing, it's going to survey, getting agile research back very quickly to answer a question, and then maybe, I like what you just said, in a way, it's understanding insights, right? I think about behavioral insights and really understanding how people think, really building empathy. And those things can take time. It usually takes being with customers for a while and not getting them to take surveys. So getting back to the question, how do you balance fast insights with kind of behavioral insights and understanding? Where's that balance come from?
Yeah, for me, they both have places in the toolbox, right? And I always go back to the fundamentals of what we do in our craft, right? Is get clear on the brief, right?
Yeah.
what's the decision that needs to be made? When does it need to be made? How is it going to be used, right? And then use the tool that's right for that, right? So to your point, if it's something that has to be quick, I need a data point, I need to validate something, right? I can do that quickly. And I can get you an answer, and it's going to be, fairly good, right? But if it has to be strategic, if it has to be inspirational, right? I'm getting into driving innovation or driving creative, you need more time to understand that, or you really get to a deep insight that is going to spark something, right? That's got to take time. So use the tools where it's needed, right?
I agree with you, Michelle. I think that, at least in my experience in our industry, the agile tools that we have today aren't sufficient enough to get to that deeper, richer insight. So I usually advise my team to leverage agile tools and platforms for more straightforward business questions. But when it comes to something that you need more deeper understanding and connection to the insights, then you should be looking to partner with the right vendor to really get down to the right methodology so that you can understand exactly what is happening and how better to craft your communications.
So I want to talk a little bit about, I think the way we talk about it sometimes it's these fast insights versus empathy insights or behavioral insights. And the idea of fast insights are to get us very quick information readily. So that's fine, that's great, we have tools to do that. I was talking with somebody who is really close with Liquid Death, the brand Liquid Death. And he told me about this conversation where their CEO was saying how they don't do things like package testing on Liquid Death, right? They don't do that because they built such a strong empathy with their customer that they can get the fastest insights ever just because they built this empathy. There is no empathy vacuum. So they can make fast decisions, and it's a big, big brand now, and they didn't have to go through the fast insights that so many other companies have to do. So is that kind of thinking of, if we built empathy within our organization, that we can actually become faster, or is the world really like, no, we need data, we need the point that says this many people said this so we can make our decisions? Do you struggle with that idea?
Yeah, I think our stakeholders want the data.
They want the data.
They want the data, they want the validation, check the box, right? So I do think you have to balance that, but I think it becomes easier when you have that empathy, right? So there's a bit of intuition that still plays in all of this, right? And I think you can create the right messaging and the right content, so the validation just becomes, honestly, the checkbox at the end of the day.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And customers are going to want the data. They're going to want to see the numbers. But if you don't have that foundational understanding of your customer, and for us, it's physicians and patients, and physicians are humans too. So you really need to understand their mind state and understand their motivations and the behavioral science behind what they do, why they do it, to have a better understanding of how to position a product.
Now, Michelle, specifically for you, do you feel like there's an empathy vacuum in our industry right now? Have we moved so far that there's a vacuum? And if so, how have you seen that play out? For any of your brands where you're like, gosh, we just don't know. We have lots of data, but we really don't know this person, this customer.
Yeah, I think because our timelines are so much shorter, right? We need things and turn them around so quickly. You even see it in your industry. It leads us to go to these agile tools, right? And I'll give you I work in snack food brands. The example I have is, Super Bowl is a big occasion for snacking, right? And I think we did a lot of work to just validate messages, validate ideas, understand just surveys around what people are using. We just had a lot of data, right? And we got that through all of those agile tools, but we stepped back and said, do we really understand this occasion, right? And we were putting out activations that were just okay, but they really weren't delivering the ROI that we needed it to. And it wasn't until we stepped back and said, okay, let's really understand the mindset. What are consumers doing this occasion? What's important to them? We went shopping with them, right? How do they even shop for this? And that's where the ahas happened, right? And we realized it actually is a quite routine occasion. People serve the same things year in and year out, right? And our brand just wasn't on the radar. They weren't going down the aisle. They weren't, passing any of our displays. And that really got us to think well, how can now our brand break into something that's a little more routine, right? It changed the way we have to serve up the message, serve up the promotion, where we need to be in store, right?
Yeah.
We never would have gotten that from just surveys
and data, right? Fast, agile research.
Yeah.
Well, Katie, how about for you? There must be, I mean, it's really tough with who you support, right? Because you're doing work with patients and I'm sure with medical professionals. So building empathy must be really difficult because you don't probably live in that world as much, meaning like from your personal life. You're not a clinical psychologist or whatever. So is there an empathy vacuum in your industry? And if so, how do you try to get around that vacuum?
Well, I think, as I was mentioning before, sometimes we forget in our industry that physicians are people too. And they're human. They will make mistakes. They are just as busy as we are in our everyday lives. They're being asked to do more in less time. So they're going to be using mental shortcuts and decision heuristics. They're going to be relying on those without even knowing it. It's unconscious. So if you're going to ask them questions in a survey or in a standard qualitative interview, and you're asking for stated responses back, you're not going to be getting really at the heart of what's driving their behavior. You're not going to really understand them and what's motivating them and driving them. So we actually were fairly early into a new product launch and not seeing uptake of a really fantastic product that we thought would change patients' lives. And we understood, that we had a big gap to make up. So we wanted to better understand what's going on with our product positioning. Is it the right positioning for this brand, or did we fall off somewhere along the way?
Yeah.
And in using behavioral science to better understand different key motivators, goals, and heuristics that were coming into play when making treatment decisions, thank you to Will for all of his great work on this, we were able to uncover some issues with our product positioning as well as with our messaging, where we were actually tapping into a decision heuristic that wasn't working well for our brand. It was actually having a negative impact and creating sort of a cognitive dissonance or avoidance,
like an avoidance, yeah,
with our brand, which was really interesting to learn and has helped us to revitalize the positioning for that product.
So let me, we have a lot of people in the audience and they may feel like there's an empathy gap. They may feel like they have too much data. Other people may feel like they don't have enough data and they're not, they don't have that right balance. So what advice could each of you give to somebody who's out there looking to reconnect with the human side? They haven't done qualitative research in many, many years, maybe since even pre-COVID. And maybe the budgets don't support it anymore. I don't know. Or the timelines may not support it all. But do you have any advice to help, anybody out here to help them rebuild this, kind of connection with their customers?
Budgets are always tight for us too. So I could definitely speak to that. And sometimes you don't have to do more market research. If you have some qualitative insights at hand, hire a behavioral specialist, hire someone who understands these different theories and can apply them to the insights that you already have. That's one nice, quick way to really do a deep dive into it. Also, I would pressure test your business assumptions. Look at those questions. Do you really, truly have the answers that you need to make the right decisions, or are you missing something? That might be enough leverage to gain additional budget.
Yeah, that's good. There are lots of tools out there now that can make the qualitative and the human side quicker and cheaper, right? I think when we think of it, sometimes you get intimidated because, wow, it's going to take a long time or it's going to cost a lot. But there are tools out there that can do it. Make it accessible, make it easy, just go do it, right? And don't let the timeline and the budget get in the way. I think mobile ethnography has just opened up a world of new ways of doing this, right? And it doesn't have to be this big, complex project anymore.
Okay. So the big topic, I know you guys are going to hate me for asking this, it's AI, and this idea that we're all, so many of the vendors here and the suppliers here are using artificial intelligence. And is there a role, so we've talked about empathy, and is there a role for artificial intelligence, natural language processing, any of the tools that we have are being presented here and they will be presented for the next 2 or 3 years. Is there a role for artificial intelligence and behavioral science and empathy to live together? And if so, where do you see that kind of collaborative?
Yeah, I've seen some incredibly fascinating things that AI can do.
Yeah.
Right? So I think there'll be a world where the AI will be trained in behavioral science. It will be your psychologist, your anthropologist, your sociologist, right?
You're making me sweat.
I know, sorry. It's just about cloning you, that's all.
Yeah, that's all.
In an AI way. But that's where I think it can get really incredible, right? And if it's trained in that sort of theory and then put on top of your data, like what it can uncover in really interesting ways and faster, cheaper ways. So.
Mm-hmm.
That would be really cool. That would be on my wish list.
Yeah. Okay.
It's coming. I've seen some demos that are just amazing.
Really, that's amazing. I love that idea. So we have about 4 or 5 minutes left, and I'll just ask 2 questions. The first one would be, what is like that golden rule? What's that takeaway? You and I actually talked about this on the phone when I first met you. That, what's that 1 or 2 things that you could tell anybody right now? Just go do this. If you want to build empathy, don't make it too hard. Like, just go do this. What would that be?
Yeah, we talked about this. I think, we forget that we're all just consumers, right? And again, it doesn't have to be a crazy study. Just get curious, right? Like, what do you do? What do your neighbors do? What do your coworkers do, right? Go observe people. Go live in people's shoes, right? I think those are really simple, easy things you can do just to develop empathy, and you can do them every day, and they don't cost things. I think they're at our fingertips.
Yep.
That's great. We do a little bit of that in pharma, where you can do ride-alongs with the reps to see what is it like in the physicians' offices. And I hear everyone comes back from those, and it's eye-opening for them. Sometimes the market research insights don't really tell the full story. They need to see it. They need to hear it firsthand from physicians. In addition, something I was thinking about is if you're having any challenges trying to adopt more behavioral science techniques at your company, I know for us it was helpful when we had some on-site training. So we invited someone in, a specialist, to actually train up our marketers and other insights leaders to really understand what behavioral science was, what are the hypotheses behind it, what is it about human nature that is so interesting and how it drives different behaviors. And that was eye-opening for our marketers, who were used to seeing more data, black and white numbers, and that's, especially when you have data companies that call it behavioral data, but it's actually just secondary data.
I'll tell you guys some things that I've recently heard other companies doing. One was at the executive level, they felt like the company that I was working with was saying, we don't feel like we understand customers, and so they want to get back to humanizing insights. And so 2 things we did. First thing we did was they were thinking about a price increase. And the price increase was going to take a very impulse-driven category, it's in the snacking category, was going to take it to a price where we felt, from our point of view, was going to take it into a place where you would actually finally lose elasticity. Like we would finally soften elasticity. And the CEO didn't believe it. They go, oh, that's not true. So what we did, and so actually we said, when you take this price increase, you're going to become more expensive than protein, than meat. For a lot of, that's a real big deal if you're on a budget, and all of a sudden a snack is now as expensive as protein. He didn't believe us. So all we did as a group was, over the weekend when we went grocery shopping, everybody was to hold on their grocery receipt and circle the things that are above $5. A little bit more now. And what we did was, by saying that, I was saying everything that is now above, look, and we just showed the CEOs the receipts and showing them the things that were circled that were above protein, and saying, you just now realize that when you go to that, you're competing against meat. And that's a very difficult thing for a CEO who probably has not shopped on his own, right, in a decade, right? The second thing I'll tell you was they wanted to do shop-alongs. And from a behavioral science perspective, let me just tell you, when you do a shop-along, when you go and actually shop at a grocery store, there's a very different experience when you place somebody on a budget, and we're placing the executives on budgets, right? So we're going to give you $35. You have to buy for the entire family for a week. Okay, so we go in there and we send the executives in. If you start off in the deli section first versus you start off in the other side of the grocery store first, that's a very different shopping experience. And so what I'll tell you is that even when you're going to bring empathy in, behavioral science still comes into play. So we force some executives to go to the deli, and so the prices are higher. They start seeing fresh foods, so they want to have fresh foods, but then your budget goes like this. Or on the other hand, we send other people on the other side of the grocery store, and then the executives are buying more of the processed stuff and they get more food, but then they have to look at their basket and say, I've got a ton of processed foods, but there's no protein, I don't have any fruits and vegetables, I lost my budget. Just that simple thing of bringing kind of behavioral science into that perspective really helped increase empathy of what it really feels when you're trying to balance health and amount of food. So I'll just leave you guys with that. We are at 3 seconds out, and I think do we have any questions? Awesome. Okay.
I was literally just telling someone off stage that the trouble for me with the questions is that I have to have my glasses so I can't see my phone. So anyway, you do have a question, which is, how do you align stakeholders with behavioral theories when everyone wants hard data points to validate?
Did you hear that? How do you align the desire for behavioral sciences and theories when the executives want hard data? They want the data points.
I think my biggest advice is you got to tell the story. Right? You've got to, the data is a piece of it, but then bringing the behavioral science brings the whole context and the whole story together. So if you get both pieces to come together and tell the story, I think that's what can get the attention, right?
One thing that was successful for us is in working with a good vendor that can make the behavioral theories more concrete, easier to digest. Put them into a framework that's simple. Right? Don't go beyond 3 or 4 specific things. That helps to make it more sort of quantifiable. Maybe there's segmentation involved that feels like a little bit of the heavy numbers. But yeah, I think it's an acknowledged challenge.
Absolutely.
Super. Well, that was the last question. Please join me in thanking Will and Katie and Michelle for this great presentation. And I'm also personally thanking you for being so entertaining and interesting right before lunch. Hard gig.